sleeved up here, and on the other side, Luis was on black-white. But here, these two players are playing the same deck, Paul. They are on a mirror match. 74 out of the 75 cards are the same.
Yeah, and this is kind of a new deck. This is kind of an updated version of some of that the Rakdos Arcanist deck that we've seen in the past, but really not looking to leverage the graveyard as much as other versions in the past, and really kind of turning it into more of just a straight mid-range deck. This deck feels a lot like the way kind of the old Jund decks used to play out, where you just strip your opponent's hand with Inquisitions and Thoughtseizes, grind your opponent down to no cards with removal, and then kind of win off of the back of your Planeswalkers and Kroxa.
That's a very apt description. That is exactly how it felt. It's a flurry of resources in the early part where both players end up with kind of nothing, and then whatever is left over cleans up the mess. You see the first Inquisition of Kozilek of the match here comes from Luis Scott-Vargas, or maybe not. Looks like let's see, maybe we're following along with Luis on the bottom here. Does seem to be the case.
Yeah. Probably going to need to flip that.
Flipped, yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks like we've got, we'll get that addressed here shortly, but yeah, so Luis is going to fire off Kroxa here, and that's just going to be thrown immediately into the bin. But you can see the attrition is very much on. Both players having now resolved Inquisition of Kozilek. You can see Go Blank in the hand here of Luis. And over on Gabe's side, well, he's down to nothing. He's got 3 lands, and he does draw an Unholy Heat as well.
Yeah, but at least for the time being, you have to favor Luis's side, as he did have the Pyromancer, which Nassif didn't have an answer for.
Okay, looks like we're just going to start right over again here. We were only a couple of turns in, so we'll just kind of catch back up here as we do so. But I've got some predictions here, Paul, I tell you that.
Yeah, I'm going to like Luis's side, at least for the short term.
I am too. Now, interesting to note, though, that as we do rewatch here, you know, Luis did mulligan to 6. And the Inquisition, once again here from Nassif.
And
we'll be caught up to where we were in just a moment here.
Yeah, and no matter what, this is unfortunate for Nassif because his plan was to cast Dreadhorde Arcanist and then be able to flashback the Inquisition. However, Luis's hand had both Fatal Push and Inquisition, so no matter what, he was going to be able to nab or deal with that Dreadhorde Arcanist.
All right, and there's the Kroxa. That's going to nail a land, and then we'll see Nassif's draw step here. We know he finds an Unholy Heat, but then the question is, where does he go from there? Because, you know, at this point in the game, things looking good for Scott-Vargas. He's the one with 2 spells in hand, where Nassif's down to just 1.
Yeah, and if you're Luis, you're probably just going to try to see if you can empty out your hand if possible, and just run out the Go Blank, because what you want to do ideally is cast Seasoned Pyromancer with no other cards in hand, as that allows you to basically just draw cards for free. If you have no cards in hand and you cast a Seasoned Pyromancer, boom, that's 2 free cards for you. You do not need cards in hand to discard before drawing with that card.
Nassif giving himself a chance to draw and actually cast some of his more powerful spells, like his Planeswalkers, which cost 4 mana. By discarding the Unholy Heat, you know, I think a lot of people would have just said, well, I'll be down to my last spell here, but, you know, at least some upside here for Nassif if he were to draw a 4-mana Planeswalker, but he doesn't. He finds Spikefield Hazard, which he's just going to play. That leaves a Haunted Ridge in hand, which Luis knows about. And now is the time for Seasoned Pyromancer. He did end up stuck with the 1 mountain in hand, but that's not all bad either. You know, that Kroxa is really threatening. Oh boy, Soul Guide Lantern. This has to be a nod for the mirror, at least in some cases, and we're going to see why right here.
Yeah, there's just a lot of decks in the format that utilize the graveyard in some way, and if you don't run into one of those decks, well, Soul Guide Lantern can also cycle.
Yeah, you can just pay a mana and get your card back, which we'll see Gabriel Nassif do shortly here, I'm sure.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed when I was looking at this deck is, unlike the the Jund comparison that we have for this deck, it doesn't really put pressure on your opponent the way that a Jund deck might in the past. It doesn't have a card like Tarmogoyf. It's
True.
really good at just stopping what your opponent's trying to do. But you see what's happening here. It's, I'm attacking you for 2, I'm attacking you for 1. So that does give your opponent a little bit of time to top deck their way out of sometimes a pretty sticky situation.
And that's exactly what Nassif finds himself in here. He's now facing down a Dreadhorde Arcanist, the namesake for the deck, plus the Seasoned Pyromancer chipping in for 2. And, well, Nassif has maybe a little bit of hope with that Soul Guide Lantern and his draw step, but he's going to need to find some action very quickly here, or he is going to fall woefully behind. Looks like he's contemplating using the Soul Guide Lantern here to draw that card. He also could activate its other ability here to perhaps set back that Arcanist.
Yeah, Nassif, I don't know if just one card by itself will get it done at this point. So he probably does want to cycle this Lantern if possible to try to find multiple cards. The thing is, if he draws a Planeswalker, there are 3 4-mana Planeswalkers in this deck. It's going to be difficult to be able to deal with everything that's on the board because Luis has 2 creatures on the battlefield plus that Hive of the Eye Tyrant that's in play, and Den of the Bugbear. So if he finds a Planeswalker, he might be able to deal with one of the creatures, but it'll die from all the other threats that Luis has on board.
He found a nice instant speed way to interact here. He's got Kolagon's Command, which will take out the Pyromancer and get the last card out of Luis's hand. And there's Chandra Torch of Defiance off the top. So that's pretty much exactly how Nassif would have drawn it up. Now he has the ability to at least deal with the Arcanist. But as you mentioned, and by the way, I want to make a callback to your comparison to Jund. The creature lands, they often are the cards that clean up the mess, and that's the situation that Luis finds himself in here as well.
Yeah, now Nassif has to basically make the decision, will I use this Chandra to get this Arcanist off the battlefield, or do I want a plus and maybe I can hit one of my 1-mana removal spells, get this Arcanist off the battlefield, and still, if I can get lucky and find that, then the Chandra would be able to live or survive an attack from one of these creature lands.
Yeah, even the Den of the Bugbear wouldn't be enough. Let's see if Nassif feels that he needs to go for the high-end play. No, he says, okay, fine. I'm getting this Arcanist off the battlefield. If you want to spend your turn to kill my Chandra, fair enough. I'll take 3. She'll take the 1. And, it's a good exchange for Luis. Like, he has to feel like, okay, sure, you did it, but now I get to crack back here. I don't even have to use a spell to do so. And bang, bang, down to 12 goes Gabriel Nassif, and Chandra leaves. Wow, Seasoned Pyromancers. Like, God, these have to be the best draws here for Nassif.
Yeah, and this is just 2 free cards here, and Nassif is climbing right back in here.
Boy, if he's going to keep ripping like this, it's going to be an easy day for Nassif. These are some nice draws. Hey, but you know what? Luis is hitting spells as well. He can fire off Inquisition to take out that Arcanist, and he even has Unholy Heat with Delirium to really kind of clear the board and just leave the Seasoned Pyromancer back.
Yeah, and now we're basically at parity, right?
We are.
It's pretty close. Nassif has a slightly smaller creature, but he's the one who can get in first with this Den of the Bugbear, make a token. Luis does have...
Go ahead, Paul.
Luis does have that Seasoned Pyromancer, but again, I mean, these are good value cards in the late game, but they're not exactly the best ways to use your mana.
Boy, the heavy hitters are coming out here. Luis finds his Dreadhorde Arcanist too. And there's Sorin the Mirthless off the top now for Nassif as well. Oh my God.
Jeez.
Boy, somebody hate his cornflakes this morning. He is on full attack here.
Now, Nassif doesn't have 3 black sources. That would be ideal so that he can use Fatal plus cast Sorin. As is, if he plays a Sorin, I believe Luis can just attack with Dreadhorde Arcanist and cast Unholy Heat on the Sorin. So you might see Nassif just pass here, use the Fatal Push on the Arcanist, and then cast Sorin on the following turn.
Yeah, it's really tough. That top deck from Luis of hitting the Arcanist was really nice because that Fatal Push had one of these creature lands in its sights. And now, Nassif has to manage his resources. Leaving an Arcanist on the battlefield is rarely the way to go. So here we go. Fatal Push to kill it. Kind of awkward timing here as well for Nassif. You know, you'd love to have a window where you could kill the Arcanist after it attacked, but then it's too late to prevent the trigger. But now Luis can fire up one of his creature lands if he wants, and I don't know if that's the right play, but, you know, he could try to get in there.
Yeah, I imagine Luis is just going to pass at this point and just make 2 tokens off the Seasoned Pyromancer that's in his graveyard here.
Okay. There's another hive off the top of the library here for Nassif, but once he gets this Sorin the Mirthless going, that could be the type of, you know, 2-for-1, even 3-for-1 that he can generate that really is going to give Luis a handful.
Yeah, Nassif just has to be mindful of just how much damage Luis can get in for next turn. And, you know, if he's trying to figure out what mode he wants to use here for the Sorin.
Oh, it looks like he's going to go for the plus. Wow, and there's another Fatal Push, but as you mentioned, the amount of black mana catching up to Nassif here. He still has a Planeswalker on 5 with a blocker, though, so he's got to feel like he's in a pretty good position. Another Arcanist, man. These guys are gloves off on this first round. Both of them fueling the fire very nicely. I like it. This makes for an exciting match.
So with the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, keep in mind that creature has Menace. Luis can send everything to Sorin, and it'll get it off the battlefield because Nassif didn't have that 3rd black source.
Yeah, that ended up being really important because nabbing that Hive of the Eye Tyrant with the Fatal Push at this juncture would have been pretty
excuse me, one short. This is going to get Sorin down to 1.
It'll get Sorin down to 1, but still, that's pretty nice. I mean, ooh, Soul Guide Lantern again. No, both players have hit, you know, 5-6 mana and just stopped drawing lands. All right, now that I say that, there's the pathway.
I mean, this deck's even got Dark Confidant, basically.
Yeah,
it's just
it just costs a little more.
Yeah, and now if you're on the Nassif side, he has a lot more of his bases covered. Now his mana's untapped. He's got that Fatal Push for one of those creature lands, and he's just continuing to pull ahead with that Sorin the Mirthless on the battlefield.
Yeah, that card is really the focal point of the game at this point. Luis must deal with it. If it gets to stick around for another, say, 2 turns, it's likely that it'll lead to too big of an advantage for Luis to overcome if he doesn't have something similar going on his side of the battlefield. And it looks like Nassif wants to get a little frisky here. He's going to fire up Den of the Bugbear himself and fire that in for 4. He's now able to leave up the Fatal Push. Again, Luis does know about Fatal Push, which is pretty important here, right? It's a big risk to dump all your mana into a Hive of the Eye Tyrant or a Den of the Bugbear. He may feel forced to do so, but this is Nassif really kind of moving towards sealing the deal here, it looks like. He's not quite at that threshold where he's got it locked up, but he's applying pressure on multiple dimensions to Luis. Oh, wow. What a draw from Luis. He finds Inquisition of Kozilek to clear out Fatal Push. You know, Nassif can kill the token, but that means that these creature lands are once again ready to go.
Right, and now we can
he can actually kill it.
Now we can kill Sorin, and the coast is clear for Arcanist on the following turn.
Wow, what a turnaround. Sick rips here from both players. It's been fun. This mirror's kind of sweet.
Now keep in mind, Luis is at 13. And Luis does need to attack the Sorin here. So Nassif, even with nothing, can get in for a pretty sizable attack next turn with
get in
the
for
Den
7
of the Bugbear.
here, right? Oh, and there's Inquisition of Kozilek now for Nassif to take out the Arcanist. Oh, man. This has been sweet.
Yeah, and probably just weighing his options and considering maybe, will there be a better opportunity for me to cast this Inquisition? Is Luis just holding a land in his hand?
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I think that even if he came to the conclusion it's probably a land, the answer just still might be, nah, this is as good as it's going to get.
Right.
And he fires it off. So now Luis is back down to nothing, and 7 damage is coming across. It is time to get in the red zone, says Gabriel Nassif, as he looks to close this thing out. And there's finally a
Oh,
land off the top for Luis. Now he does have a creature land for a block. 2, 3, 4, 5. Puts him effectively dead here, Paul.
yeah, he's got a Hive of the Eye Tyrant that he can put in front of maybe the Pyromancer. But yeah, I mean, at this point, oh jeez,
Wow, wow, wow.
oh
There's Crux, a
jeez.
Titan of Death's Hunger here for Nassif. And it looks like finally he's found enough to get the job done. And Gabriel Nassif picks up game number 1. Wow. That was a real slugfest, Paul. Back and forth with everybody finding exactly what they need, exactly when they needed it. But at the end of the day, it was Nassif. And, you know, I have to look back to that Sorin, right? It soaked up a lot of damage. It soaked up a lot of mana from Luis, and it netted Nassif a couple of cards as well. And that seemed to be the card in the middle part of the game that kind of put it over the top for Nassif.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly how this type of matchup is going to play out, right? It's the person who continues to get those 2-for-1s off the different uh, planeswalkers or seasoned pyromancers. They're the one who's going to end up kind of coming out on top. And, you know, the way that this matchup plays out, it's really just last threat standing takes it down, whether it be a creature land or even a 2/2 seasoned pyromancer that's on the battlefield. Whatever it is, that's what's going to take it home.
It does feel like both of these lists, they're effectively the same list. There's a slight sideboard difference, 1 card difference between the two, but they definitely feel prepared for the mirror, right? Like there's quite a bit in the mirror that actually matters. The hives came into play there. We saw Go Blank matter. We saw the main deck Soul Guide Lanterns affect, you know, graveyards. Graveyards were not safe. There were a
Yeah.
lot of cards exiled from both sides there.
And you can see Nassif even boarding out a copy of the Croxa here for that reason, just recognizing that, well, they're playing the same 75. After sideboard, both players are going to have 3 gold blanks, a couple of Leyline of the Voids, and they're still going to be having those 2 Soul Guide Lanterns in play, right? So it's pretty tough to be able to get enough cards in your graveyard to get that Croxa back. So trimming on one of those makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Looks like a couple of other trims here for Nassif before we head back in.
Yeah, they probably didn't have a whole lot of time to figure out sideboard strategies for the mirror, as I do not think too many other teams will have come to a very similar list to this one. The other Rakdos decks that you've seen in the past, the Rakdos Arcanist lists, are the ones that really try to leverage their graveyard, playing cards like Stitcher Supplier, Village Rites, and just trying to turbocharge out a Crocs and utilize the graveyard a lot more.
Boy, I do like that Village Rites Croxa 1-2 punch. That feels broken when it happens. Look at this Leyline of the Void pre-game actions here for Gabriel Nassif. He gets to just put that into play because it was in his opener. And that means that any of those shenanigans are not going to be relevant anymore for Scott-Vargas. And you can see he's got a hand with some shenanigans too.
It's like, what do you take? I mean, if you take a creature, you can get it back with the Culligan's command and make your opponent discard a card.
Well, but the Leyline, I mean,
Excuse me. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
he just gets to totally craft his plan now around graveyard doesn't matter. Wow, nice rip here for Luis. He finds a 2-drop in Magmatic Channeler. He'll put that thing into play, and there's no answer for it on the other side here from Nassif.
Yeah, and both lists, however, do have an answer for enchantments in Feed the Swarm. I imagine both of them did choose to bring them in, specifically to deal with cards like Leyline.
Dude, look at this. Magmatic Channeler off the top. He activates it, gets rid of Croxa, which isn't going to do much, and he even hit Dreadhorde Arcanist off the activation.
Yeah.
That's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, although currently Arcanist is
yes
a Lumen Grid Warden. it's a
wow.
2-mana.
Wow, you went really deep.
I went deep for that one.
There's 5 people watching that are like, yeah, I got that.
Yeah, Paul. For the players 20 years ago. But yeah,
3 for 2, baby.
It's a 2-mana 1/3 that basically has no text until Luis does find a Feed the Swarm to deal with that Leyline of the Void.
That's right. Here's Seasoned Pyromancer, though. For Nassif, he's looking at a pair of 1/3s. That Kolaghan's command loses a bit of its luster. And let's see if he wants to filter through some lands. He knows all 3 cards in Luis's hand, so, you know, Inquisition, does he want to save it for one of these 3-drops? He knows he can get something with it if he'd like. But it looks like that's going to be the first card out of hand here for Nassif. And he'll ditch one of his lands too.
Yeah, he might just want to have that extra creature on the battlefield as well.
Mm-hmm. Haunted Ridge is a draw step here for Scott-Vargas. But he's found a target now for his Kolaghan's Command. He can get rid of Seasoned Pyromancer, and he can force Nassif to get rid of at least one of these cards. Again, attrition is the name of the game, right? Having your opponent discard a card when they're on 4 doesn't seem super great, but it adds up over time.
Getting in there.
Just getting in. Bedevil is the draw step here for Nassif.
Yeah, the awkward part about Kolaghan's Command is just the fact that it doesn't actually do a very good job of killing creatures in the head-to-head, because the relevant threats are these 2-mana 1/3s, and killing a Seasoned Pyromancer doesn't feel like you're getting a whole lot of value there either, right, as they're filtering or getting ahead on cards if they're empty-handed.
Another black source would be nice here for Nassif, so he's going to play Blightstep Pathway. That unlocks the Bedevil for him, if he'd like to fire it off. Currently, maybe? I don't know. I guess it depends on how he views the Magmatic Channeler. Luis decided just to attack with it last time rather than discard a 3-drop. He had other uses for his mana anyway.
Magmatic Channeler is especially good in the deck when you can utilize your graveyard as a resource, right? You know, when you can discard Seasoned Pyromancers and Cruxes and use that to basically have additional spells that you can play from your graveyard. Right now, as is, Nassif did choose to kill it, but it's not quite as effective given that the Leyline of the Void is in play.
Right, it's more of a card selection engine. And,
right.
But he did want to shut him off from it, so a good answer. There's another Kolaghan's Command now from Scott-Vargas. That'll leave him with Seasoned Pyromancer plus Mountain in hand as we see Nassif discard Fabled Passage, and he's down to just Kolaghan's Command plus Seasoned Pyromancer in the yard. He does find a land if he wants to do the thing, but it looks like he's going to get a creature back here, which is just the Pyromancer, and then get the last card out of hand for Luis. Pretty powerful stuff. How about I get a Pyromancer and you don't?
The word scrappy comes to mind when you think about this head-to-head.
Absolutely.
We just see people just attacking for 1, maybe hit you with a creature land. Luis doesn't even have a creature land.
Good draw here from Nassif in the sense that this is a very discardable spell, so it'll get him the 1/1 anyway. Wow, Feed the Swarm and Soul Guide Lantern as well.
Yeah, and we're probably going to see this get cycled here, as he does have a Leyline in play.
That's right.
Yeah, and that is the really nice thing about this specific version of Rakdos is you get to play 8 copies of hand disruption spells, but you also have ways to filter through them in the late game, right? You have access to the 4 copies of the Seasoned Pyromancer. In addition, you have the 2 copies of the Magmatic Channeler, which helps you kind of cycle through those cards in the late game where they become not quite as effective.
We see Kolaghan's Command off the top of the library here for Luis. That's going to get rid of the Seasoned Pyromancer, and that's about it. Fatal Push off the top of the library will kill the Dreadhorde Arcanist, but that Arcanist wasn't doing too much thanks to the Leyline of the Void anyway. But I guess it was blocking.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see a Den of the Bugbear attack here, or a Seasoned Pyromancer.
Yeah, I like the Den. I mean, he's got Luis down to nothing.
Yeah.
Luis doesn't even have any creature lands this time.
The only downside is if Luis draws like a lantern or something.
Luis draws Go Blank, but decides not to cast it.
Huh.
There's a Pyromancer in the graveyard. It's tempting.
Yeah, and now Nassif's switching gears here.
He's getting crafty, but it looks like he's going to leave up the ability to flash it back.
I wonder if he almost sniffed that out, right? Because the previous turn he attacked with the Den, and then when Luis keeps the card in hand and passes, Then he goes, wait a second. Maybe the card you have is something that could interact with my graveyard.
And now he's going to fire up the Hive instead because it doesn't change the clock and it's less vulnerable to Flame Blast Bolt. And Gabriel Nassif dispatches of his fellow Hall of Famer Luis Scott-Vargas in 2 convincing victories in the mirror there. Particularly game 1 was really impressive by Nassif, just seeming to chain together value spells